One thing, I think is like your second most popular video right now is you talking about why you're open about your anabolics use and your kind of general stance towards the image you portray to your impressionable audience about it, and like what your the perception you kind of want to, how vague or not vague you want to be about it, and in being transparent, but you also don't want to speak of exactly like what you're doing necessarily. Like
Yeah.
for you, presumably a lot of it revolves around the fact that you're an actual competitor. But at what age did you make that switch to the dark side?
So this is a story you may enjoy, and as to how I got into it. Uh, but I'm very open about my usage. I have never told anyone about what, because I don't really want to promote it, but I do want to raise awareness around it, because of the effects that it has on mental health, and sustainability for a lot of people that are getting into. And this is kind of what triggered and sparked that particular video, about fake influences. I just had enough with watching, or observing as I was growing and witnessing the growth of others, that were clearly using some sort of, testosterone or some sort of enhancer, or anabolics, whatever, steroids, whatever they want to refer to it. But we're claiming natural, and we're just setting unrealistic expectations for people as they are promoting, their supplements or their training program, and claiming that that is simply, the result of their current physique as a result of simply following a strict training and eating regime. So a lot of people getting into fitness don't see these same results, even though they're following the plans, even they're following eating and the training plans. And so it's very discouraging. And then I would witness a very high drop off, in terms of people just getting out of fitness. And that for me was very problematic, and that is why I wanted to address the issue. But as to how I got into it, like I said, that's obviously a little bit light, a little bit less serious than the message I just had to deliver. But I got into training, and I was the skinny kid. I was extremely skinny. And we touched on it. I was at my present height, weighing around 68 kilos, which is about
50
150
pounds.
pounds.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like the walking version of a ramen noodle, or an electric cord.
Yeah.
I really looked like an electric cord. And I faced a lot of criticism, and I was bullied. And I mean, that had obviously quite serious effect in terms of my self-confidence and so forth. And there was one particular incident, which was kind of the tipping point or the turning point for me, where I said, okay, enough being the skinny kid. I need to do something about this. And although I had been to the gym like once or twice, I was, kind of distracted with other hobbies and things, and being very active, but hadn't ever really taken to going to the gym. But it seemed to me the logical thing at the time was to go to the gym in order to build muscle, to not be a ramen noodle, so that I could, project a more masculine figure, so that I obviously, wasn't bullied as much. And so I got into fitness, and it was very late. It was around the age of 23. And I was in the gym, and I was working hard and training hard, and doing my thing. And I was still working a job at the time. And so I asked my mum. I said, "Mum, would you mind just going to the supplement store for me and just get me something to build muscle, right? Creatine, protein." I mean, she went to the supplement store. Her time was a lot more, flexible than mine at the time. And so So she went to the local supplement store, and she said, "Okay, my son needs something for training. He wants to build muscle." And so the guy said to her, "Okay, well, does he want something above the counter or below the counter?" So my mom phones me and she's like, "Okay, look, so do you want something above the counter or below the counter?" I said, "Well, what the hell does that mean?" So she says,
Yeah.
"Well," she says, "I'm guessing below the counter isn't exactly or entirely legal."
Yeah.
I says, "Well, does it work? Is it going to help me put on muscle? You know?" And so she came home with, she got me my first cycle, which at that point was just more of a pro hormone stack. But
Do you remember what it
yeah,
was specifically by chance?
it was super anadrol.
Oh, so just like a brand name for Superdrol, probably.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
That's crazy how
um,
that shit used to be sold over the counter, eh? Or under the counter technically, but
yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
yeah, but like they had like methyl 1 testosterone, Superdrol, just like the most liver toxic of toxic drugs, and they would just
Yeah,
give it to kids.
1990 no. Yeah, I mean that's toxic. I mean, I had no education. I had no idea. I was just taking these capsules to put on muscle, and I thereafter met a friend who was a lot more knowledgeable, but still it was very much bro science.
Mm.
Um, he had a lot more experience when it came to anabolics and things, and despite the fact that he was injecting as much as probably the present day Olympians. I mean, this guy was on everything, and his stack was tremendous, right? But he couldn't get past uh, the typical men's physique, kind of structure, even though he had been training for many years, and even though, I think he was just at a genetic disposition and probably his diet, but he was relying solely on the use of anabolics to kind of, get bigger. And it was at that point that I realized the importance of, knowing what I was injecting in my body. And that kind of, set me off to become a lot more knowledgeable and research and familiarize myself with, the different type of substances and chemicals, and, and what to stack with what, and so on and so forth. And yeah.
How many years after you started training did you like? Was that pretty soon after? Because it's not like you really knew what you were getting when you got it. Was that like right at the beginning of your lifting sort of thing, or
It was in the first year.
okay? Huh.
Yeah, yeah.
But obviously, in
And
hindsight, I imagine you would have like held off for like out. I don't know, like a certain amount of years before you had a certain amount of like there's like arbitrary rules put on like when makes sense to like start or not start. And I don't
mm,
necessarily know that there should be like a tangible like set cutoff for okay, now you've like you can take shit now versus like because if you're still not educated, even if you're an arbitrary age, it doesn't mean that you should be taking this stuff to begin with. Like in hindsight, is there something you would have done differently as far as taking a certain amount of time to
oh,
educate yourself or
I would have done a few things differently. You know, I wish, like, I always question, if my mom didn't go to that particular store, speak to that particular person, she would have probably come home with a tub of creatine, and um, so yeah, I would have done things very differently for myself with if I had the knowledge, or better knowledge, than what I had at the time. Um, it was the complete lack of knowledge at the time that I did the things, and took the things that I did. And that's the general ethos in terms of, what the platform is about. It's helping people learn from my mistakes,
yeah.
because there's a lot of mistakes that I've made along the way, which very fortunately haven't been, detrimental. Um, but I certainly would have done things very differently. I mean, the fact that my diet was atrocious at the time. I was relying and surviving off of fast foods, when I was given this pro hormone stack. I only later realized the value and the importance of food, and I mean, a lot of people ask me, if you could go back, what would you change? Well, I would have cleaned up my diet and my eating far earlier in my bodybuilding career. I mean, if you want to refer to it as that, because you need to get out as much from the utilization of food and eating before you even consider these things. So yeah, and
Do you think with the general evolution of like how social media, like obviously some of this stuff like education material wise wasn't accessible back in when you first started, like unfortunately a lot of the stuff we like, I had access to forums and like, random bros at the gym and stuff, but even that was not up to the par of information at least accessible now. However, even with the accessibility, there's a lot of people that like put out shitty information too. So like it's kind of a double-edged sword, it seems like now. Like, what's your general stance on the direction the education of the younger generation has taken? Because there's like a lot of people talking about this stuff openly now, for the better or worse in a lot of cases, I feel like.
Yeah. So that's actually the topic of a video that we have planned, because now with a lot of people, I mean, I took the stance where I came out and said, okay, I do use anabolics, and I never had the intention, like I said, ever to promote, because if I could have done things differently for myself, I would have, but just more to raise awareness and more for the sustainability. And I see that has sparked like a trend. I mean, whether it originated from my video or not, but I noticed a lot more people on social media that have come out and being open about the use of anabolics, right? But it not in the correct manner, where it's used to raise awareness and to educate, but they're romanticizing it, and and therein I find that to be problematic. I don't think it should ever be romanticized. I think these platforms should be used correctly and appropriately to educate. I think, I mean, that's the roles that we take on as influencers, but and one of the downsides to what you mentioned in terms of having this platform and speaking about it is that it could be seen as also encouragement.
Yeah. No, yeah, there's a lot of younger influencers, especially, who very, very impressionable audiences that are very young and don't really know even the basics around training or diet. And then they see fill in the blank influencer who looks great and they're open and transparent about their use. But then that transparency, as much as it's respected that it's open and honest about taking stuff, it could be perceived as encouraging. And it almost makes you like, it almost sort of reinforces a little bit certain individuals that are like lying about their natural status to not influence their followers. And you can sort of gather why that may be the conclusion some of them come to. A lot of them do mislead and like to sell shit, which is bad. But at the same time, it's like a fine line where if you're a guy who's cranking your face off and then you have like a bunch of 16-year-olds following you who aspired to be like you, what do? Do you talk about it? I don't know. And sometimes they don't even really know what they're doing either. They pay a coach who tells them exactly what to do and they just follow the game plan, but they don't actually know how to explain it or any of the information surrounding it. So they're not necessarily qualified to talk about it either. So it's kind of like an interesting double-edged sword dynamic going on social media right now. It's kind of hard to traverse, it seems like.
Mm.
Yeah.
The problem that I see is that it's, like I said, I think the best term is to say that it's being romanticized, and there's memes about it. I, like I said, it comes down to responsibility that I feel that these influencers need to take upon themselves to educate correctly and raise the correct message here, because either way it is a double-edged sword, and either way it can have um, adverse side effects. So it
No,
needs to
yeah.
be handled. It needs to be handled with kid gloves. Either way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad that some of the influencers some of them are taking it upon themselves to educate themselves more, so then they don't put out a message that could be promotional or harmful. But there are definitely some that, jokes about tren, and like, I don't know, sometimes it comes across as like people know tren is a very dangerous, psychoactive, and like harmful drug, but it'll still be like romanticized, like you said, about like, like the trend bologna sandwich is like a joke that a lot of
Yeah.
people make. But then sometimes it's like, when that influencer's physique was derived from their use of that, it's like, well, maybe I should,
Yeah.
if they aren't very stern about the concerns surrounding it, you get influenced. Like, I've made a video on like a 14-year-old who took tren. Like, it's fucking baffling how young some people are doing this stuff now, even with the resources available to educate themselves.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've witnessed the same, and unfortunately, and the risks worth mentioning, and the side effects as a result, particularly of tren, but as a result of the use of many anabolics. And I think a lot of people need to know, and there's establishments that can assist in doing it more responsibly. Because at the end of the day, I think it comes down to, there's a responsible way in which we can approach most things, and the likes of Merrick Health, and doing more regular blood work for starters. I think, one of the biggest struggles I have always had is being able to approach professionals, and the reluctance to approach professionals and being open with professionals, because somehow everything is always any sort of symptom or issue. The cause is always steroids.
Yeah, you should tell the story about your appointment recently. That ridiculous, wasn't it for your eyes? And they were like,
My eyes, yeah. I mean,
yeah,
so my first incident, I went to the GP. I mean, I know I voiced noted you about this the other day, but the first time I went to the GP, and I mean, he noticed I was bigger than the average human, I guess,
yeah,
and obviously a lot more muscular, and so he questioned whether I was using or not. And I mean, actually, it was one of the first times I was open and honest about it. And the response wasn't very positive from him. He condemned it, and I guess, I mean, as a GP, I mean, it's probably the responsible thing to do, but he demonized it. I mean, at the time, I was a lot more knowledgeable on it, and but he demonized it, and he turned around and he said to me, do you realize that is going to turn you into an ox? And I mean, needless to say, that was the last time that I went back to that particular GP, because I think if he supported more of what I was doing and he helped me do it in a more responsible way, yeah, I mean, it would still be my GP, but he would have, if he directed me in the right direction. And then more recently, so I mean, as a result, I've just learned, I mean, if you're going to visit the GP, you kind of wear a hoodie, wear something baggy, wear something oversized, because if not, it's somehow going to be pinned to the cause being the use of steroids. And so, much to my surprise, I went to the ophthalmologist because I have, it's better now, but I have very dry eyes. I just suffer dry eyes. So my eyes are generally quite red. And as a result, a lot of people will say, "Oh, you're smoking weed, or you're high." I mean, I don't smoke weed. I'm definitely not high, but I just have like red eyes, so it's just a
Yeah.
condition. But so I went to the doctor to get this checked out, and so I was wearing like a very large, oversized T-shirt, and my calves were revealed, and I just found him so fixated on my calves, and
Yeah.
I mean, I've really been working hard on my calves, so I saw it as a big compliment at the time. But
Yeah.
and he was just so fixated, he was staring at my calves because I was sitting in this chair of his right at the time, and so he looked up at me and he said, "Are you taking that gym medicine?" Gym medicine, right?
Yeah.
But
Never heard it referred to as that. That's funny. Yeah.
so I was like, yeah, and lo and behold, I was diagnosed with blepharitis, which is dry eyes, and he somehow managed to pin that down to the fact that I take testosterone, or synthetic testosterone. So after spending a good 10 minutes Googling, he managed to come up with, one of the side effects, and he was convinced that I need to stop the testosterone and I need to take eye drops, and that's going to help me with my blepharitis or my red eyes. So
Yeah, just crash all your hormones. That'll fix the eyes for sure. Yeah.
So yeah, but I do agree. I mean, there's definitely a far more responsible way, and I think anyone that's going to talk about it needs to know and take on the responsibility to do it in a responsible manner. Um,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know,
Like, one of the things you do that is worth mentioning too is that you take very seriously your diagnostics, as detailed as actually getting organ imaging done. Like you mentioned to me how you've had an echocardiogram done. Like, that's something that even top bodybuilders, they barely get their blood work a lot of the time. They often will preach the message but not like practice what they preach necessarily, or not
yeah,
even understand how it works to begin with. Like, getting high quality organ imaging above and beyond your blood work, I think, is like absolutely critical on like a regular basis if you're somebody who's above the average like size of a normal human, as you mentioned.
mm,
So that kind of thing is, I think, shouldn't be overstated or understated for sure. And having somebody in your camp who's looking out for your best interest and isn't judgmental is huge. Like, finding a doctor who's not gonna, like, I used to get stressed to go to the doctor, like knowing that I would have to finagle my way around a conversation to get like just my cholesterol checked. Like, I would actually get nervous, like going to the doctor's office to sit in the chair to like argue for my health, kind of thing, to be like, can I please get this thing that's so basic, and I'll pay for it. Like, sometimes they wouldn't even let me pay for it. That was the baffling thing, when I wanted to pay out of my own pocket. So like, that's one of the things I'm like majorly extremely passionate about, bringing the message to a more widespread audience, and bringing high quality medical services to the public for people who don't have access to that kind of high quality care, because it's, hard to come by, unfortunately. you
it
know
is.
yeah.
It is. It's very hard to come by. I mean, here, I can speak from experience here, but from what I'm told, I mean, it's the general stance around the world. But yeah, regular blood work. I go once, sometimes twice a year. Do blood work, echocardiograms, so heart scans. I went for one more recently. Everyone questioned if I was having a baby, but
Yeah.
but bone density scans, abdominal sonars. So yeah, just there's there's a responsibility that we have towards ourselves and our own health. If we are going to use steroids, and if I mean, for anyone that plans on doing it competitively, most people that do it competitively, also, for the longevity of it is certainly something that we need to take a lot more seriously. I mean, I've noticed very alarming statistics more recently with a staggering amount of deaths amongst competitive bodybuilders,
Yeah.
and one cannot help but question why that is the case.
No, yeah, absolutely. And it's I don't know if it's just because social media is so prevalent now and stuff's getting posted about more, or if there's actually like an increasing amount, but it seems like it's like staggering how many are just like dropping like flies at this point. And
Mm.
a lot of that stuff I feel like could have potentially been avoided if these individuals knew, years back, like, oh, you have a, I don't know, a heart defect that you're predisposed to, fill in the blank, or you've been walking around with stage, high level hypertension that's like critical that you need to be in like going to the emergency room right now. They're just like literally walking around like that all the time. Stuff like that that might go overlooked just because they don't do basics, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, I mean, we touched on this earlier, but certainly the way that, I mean, the direction that Olympia is going, and I mean, the type of physiques, I mean, we know for a fact, I mean, those guys are blasting on, um, on certain protocols a lot harder than uh, previously. I mean, so again, is that sort of look, that's the sort of look that is being promoted, and what does one need to do, or what does one need to take in order to kind of obtain that sort of physique that is right now getting so much sort of hype and attention as well. So
No, absolutely. Yeah. It's unfortunate, I guess. Like I guess at the end of the day, it's almost like it's like viral content on a stage, like how massive and just absurd these guys have grown to. And I can see why it's like the hype event of the entire expo, as opposed to maybe classic physique is starting to overshadow it a bit, which would be, cool to see more of a hybrid of size and aesthetics and less,
yeah,
organ stress potential by walking on stage at 290 plus pounds or 280 or whatever. But
yeah,
yeah, hopefully, I don't know, maybe the judges will start seeing some of the recent events and change their stance. Hopefully, I don't know. Like ultimately, I don't know if there's a lot that can be done when it's trending the way it is, but hopefully people more so look at the I think more people are identifying with the aesthetic appeal more, and at least changing their personal preference less to being like just sheer mass and more like a hybrid. And I think the sheer body weight and less drug burden that you need to achieve that look is certainly at least trending in a positive direction. But people, even at that level, just because you're men's physique or classic, if you're using shit, like it's still bad, I think
yeah,
people need to realize that
yeah,
regardless.
yeah,
So
yeah, 100%. I mean, genetically, some people can obviously blast harder on, certain anabolics than others, but either way,
yeah.
irrespective of what category or what division or, size, you obviously there's a risk factor that comes with it.